LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the May 16th, 50th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Almost been doing this for a year. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 13 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be really educational, informative, fair use, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all today. As you can see, my main topic of the video is U.S. democracy on the brink as November midterm elections approach. And that has to do with some of the things going on in the primaries that I'll talk about, and some of the disturbing things going on in the Republican Party, but also the breaking story for all the news organizations on Sunday was this shooting in Buffalo, New York. This teenager, or 18 or 19-year-old, I've heard different reports about his age actually, went to a predominantly black area in Buffalo, New York, and shot up a supermarket, killed 10 people, and was motivated by racism, actually replacement theory, which is, if you remember way back in the Trump years, the march at Charlottesville, the Tiki Torch March, where they were chanting, "Jews will not replace us." Well, that was the replacement theory, where supposedly Jews and elites are in some big conspiracy to bring in, black and brown people from foreign countries to replace Americans, the real Americans or whatever. That's kind of, I guess, a definition of replacement theory, and that's actually been mainstreamed in a lot of the Republican Party. On Fox News, Tucker Carlson has referred to it. I think there was a New York Times article, which I did not put down in the video description, but as a source, but that talked about hundreds of his episodes have in some way made reference to this replacement theory, and I've seen some of it myself. I'm not just relying on the New York Times. So this is a real problem in the Republican Party that threatens our democracy, and some of the results in the midterms look like Trumpism and this kind of radicalism is winning out in the Republican Party. There are some other indicators, like I'll show Governor Pete Ricketts of Nebraska, who's very conservative, but kind of beat Trump in the primaries, at least with his endorsement, and I'll show some other clips. But actually, for my political comedy, I want to show you something that seems it's not at all involved, but actually is involved. It's this really stupid article. Some of you may have seen this article on Twitter or on social media. I'm sure most of my regular viewers know I'm a big Star Trek fan. I even have this Mr. Spock mug over my left shoulder all the time here, and there's even a little Star Trek insignia here that one of my viewers sent me years ago. And yeah, I'm a big Star Trek fan going all the way back to the 1970s. I was too young really for the original run, but watched it in reruns for many years. And anyway, here is this, excuse me, this article on the Fox News website a few days ago. Star Trek writers take Starship Enterprise where it's never gone before. Woke politics. Woke politics. Now, anyone who's a fan of Star Trek knows that Star Trek was cutting-edge culture. It had the first interracial kiss with Lieutenant Uhura, and was always taking on social issues and political issues. And actually, if you go down finally in the fourth paragraph, if you read this article, it says, "To be fair, since the original 1960s series, Star Trek has always delved into cultural and social issues. It has been credited with diverse casts, with tackling issues, and saving the whales, remember that, and with reflecting American and global foreign policy." So yeah, at least in the fourth paragraph they admit that. But what really pissed them off is two things that are over in the third paragraph of this article. That first they had Stacey Abrams on Star Trek Discovery in this cameo role, where they claimed she was the president of the Federation of Planets. But of course, since it's a Fox News article, that's a factual error. There's always at least one factual error in a Fox News article, right? She was president of Earth, not the Federation. But and then this weird plot twist in the pilot of the new Strange New Worlds, which I've also seen, in which the 2020 Capitol riot is depicted and blamed for starting a second American Civil War and the destruction of the planet. To put it more succinctly, Orange Man bad or whatever. That's like totally ridiculous. I mean, even if you watch that episode, they don't blame the 2020 Capitol riots for the destruction of Earth. I went back and just rewatched it. And he talks about, first, if you look at the montage of images, the Capitol riots are in there, but there's also George Floyd protests taking over the Brooklyn Bridge in there. And they talk about the Second Civil War, but they also talk about also the eugenics war, World War III. They kind of wrap it into one, trying to like get all the Star Trek future predictions together. And it talks about competing ideas of liberty causing the problems. And anyway, I think it all goes back to maybe not understanding the Bell riots that are supposed to take place in 2024. And I don't want to go off on a whole Star Trek tangent, but I actually was thinking of making my own like edited, produced video, like an old style LiberalViewer video titled something like "False Fox News Claims Star Trek Has Gone Woke," and then I can explain it in detail and not get too wordy and off on tangents, because I'll put it in a script. So if you want me to do that, let me know in the comments section. And anyway, that's the political comedy I wanted to start off with. And you can kind of see how they're talking about the Second Civil War, which is kind of the democracy on the brink that we're talking about. And one of the things, I mean, the 2020 Capitol riot is a symptom of something. And so is this Buffalo shooting, and based on this replacement theory, which also was the basis for, what was it, the Tree of Life synagogue shooting, was also based on this replacement theory. And I think even Anders Breivik, or the guy in New Zealand, and the guy in, was it Anders Breivik in Norway? Anyway, there have been a whole bunch of people who have been motivated by this weird theory. And I'm going to show you all 5 of the news summaries. Really, the only NBC at the beginning, the longest one, and then CNN at the end really mention replacement theory at all. And anyway, I feel like I've been talking for too long, so I will start playing that first NBC News Meet the Press news summary, which comes from Chuck Todd and Emilie Ikeda, and talking about the Buffalo shooting and specifically mentioning replacement theory in this clip.
Good Sunday morning. Well, it's happened again. A horror all too familiar in the United States. This time, the scene of what appears to have been an act of domestic terrorism was a supermarket in Buffalo, New York. A white teenager, a boy really, only 18, wearing body armor and carrying an assault rifle, opened fire at a supermarket in an African-American neighborhood. 10 people were killed, 9 of them black, and 3 others were wounded, 2 of them black. Shortly after the gunman was captured, a racist manifesto he apparently posted emerged online, filled with racist and anti-Semitic views, including the theory that whites are being replaced by people of color. Authorities say the gunman, who drove some 200 miles to carry out the slaughter, also live-streamed the massacre with a camera apparently on his helmet. It was the latest in recent mass shootings aimed at ethnic groups. Charleston, South Carolina, African Americans in church. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Jewish victims in a synagogue. El Paso, Texas, Latino victims at a Walmart. And now we add Buffalo, New York to the list. We've also, of course, seen a rise of hate crimes against Asian Americans as well. In a moment, I'm going to talk to Buffalo's Mayor, Byron Brown, and to New York's Governor, Kathy Hochul. But we're going to begin our coverage with our NBC News correspondent, Emilie Ikeda, who is in Buffalo. And Emilie, where are we on the investigation? I know the gunman was arraigned. What's next?
Hey there, Chuck. Investigators are looking into this as a hate crime and racially motivated violent extremism. And there's a number of signs pointing and explaining why. 13 people were shot between the parking lot behind me and the supermarket. 11 of those were black. Investigators are also looking into an apparent manifesto that claims that the suspect purposefully targeted this area of Buffalo because of the number of black people here. The other thing I'll point out, take a look at these images of what sources tell us are the suspect's weapons. They are blurred, and that is because there are messages of hate on them, racial slurs. And the other thing I'll mention we're learning more about this morning are the victims. These are people who were partaking in one of the most typical normal activities on a Saturday afternoon, shopping in the supermarket. The governor telling me one of the people was simply trying to buy cupcakes for a birthday party. Another person shot and killed was the security guard. He tried to stop the suspect. Here's more from officials on that.
One of the individuals inside the store is the security guard, a beloved security guard, who is a retired Buffalo police officer, a hero in our eyes, engaged the suspect, fired multiple shots, struck the suspect, but because he had heavily armored plating on, that bullet had no round. The suspect engaged our retired officer, and he was ultimately shot and deceased at the scene.
The suspect is being identified as 18-year-old Peyton Gendron. He did appear in court last night. He's charged with first-degree murder. If convicted, he could face up to life in prison. We'll see him appear in court later this week on Thursday. Still very much a developing situation, Chuck, but we expect later this morning to learn more information on both the victims and what led up and what happened in this just absolutely horrific tragedy. This community shaken to its core, Chuck.
And obviously, want to learn more about his family situation as well. Emily, thanks very much. And joining me now is the mayor of Buffalo, Byron Brown. Mr. Mayor, welcome to meet.
I don't have a clip of the mayor of Buffalo, though I do have a couple clips of the governor of New York being interviewed both by Chuck Todd and another one of the Sunday morning news anchors. And I'm actually going to criticize Chuck Todd for asking a misleading question about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. That's kind of a notorious right-wing talking point that Section 230 is unfair and gives internet companies this immunity from liability for things they should be liable for. And Chuck Todd will bring that up, or like he'll be a proponent of that right-wing talking point when he talks to Governor Hochul of New York, and that's what, clip number 6, is it? But I thought that was overall the best of the news summaries. They specifically mentioned replacement theory, and like I said, only the first and last ones do that. I think they gave a lot of good information. That they didn't really. I think it's the CBS News Face the Nation one coming up that actually shows the map of where he drove from that I thought was helpful. But overall, I mean, the only criticism I'd also have from all of these is all of a sudden on Sunday, because it happened on Saturday and it was, it is a symptom of a problem, that I was talking about, the right-wing replacement theory and how it's become mainstream, and mass shootings have become a bigger and bigger problem. But I mean, one of the things is that, I mean, how newsworthy are they when they happen so frequently? I mean, there was another shooting here in a church in Orange County the next day, and I mean, there are shootings like it. And the thing is, it's a big news story today on Sunday because it happened on Saturday. But if it happened a few days before, maybe they wouldn't have even covered it. It certainly wouldn't have been the lead story if it had been a few days older. And do you think we're ever going to see this story on the Sunday shows again? I mean, then how big a story was it? I mean, it was a big story for a few days, and then people do remember Sandy Hook, and at least Chuck Todd in that news summary showed a bunch of previous shootings, so that now we remember all of them, but we don't really remember all of them. That's really just ones that hit the news cycle at the right time and got more coverage, and there's some that never do. And anyway, that's my criticism of all this coverage. Fox News Sunday gets the farthest away from. I mean, they do mention being motivated by racism. All the next three do, and don't mention replacement theory. But I don't know. It seems like this is a little bit different just because it's from Fox News. But let's watch it together, and then we'll talk about how it might be different after we watch it together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. We will get to the national debate over abortion in just a minute, but first, breaking news. A horrific scene of violence in Western New York. Authorities saying a white 18-year-old gunman wearing military gear opened fire on a supermarket in a predominantly black neighborhood in Buffalo, killing 10 people, wounding 3 others. The suspect live streaming it all with a helmet camera. Let's go straight to the scene for the latest from Alexis McAdams. Alexis.
Shannon, that's right. A horrible scene here in Buffalo, New York, as this community continues to grieve the loss of so many innocent lives. Investigators say this was a racially motivated attack here in Buffalo, New York. Sources telling us that the gunman had an online manifesto detailing this attack and his plans that he had posted online. Take a look on your screen. This is a photo of the suspected gunman, now given to us just last night by police. Buffalo police say they've identified the gunman as 18-year-old Peyton Gendron. Just hours after that shooting, the teen was arraigned on first-degree murder charges. Investigators say he drove more than 3 hours from his small rural hometown downstate to carry out the deadliest mass shooting in Buffalo's history. Now, the shooting happened around 2:30 Saturday afternoon at this Tops grocery store in Buffalo. You can see that crime scene there. First, police say Gendron shot 3 people in the parking lot, then 10 more inside. Officers say he was armed with an assault rifle and dressed in tactical gear from head to toe. Investigators tell us of the 13 people shot, 11 were black.
This was pure evil. It was straight up racially motivated hate crime from somebody outside of our community, outside of the city of good neighbors, as the mayor said, coming into our community and trying to inflict that evil upon us.
Tonight, the suspect will be behind bars and will be back in court on Thursday. President Biden did condemn the shooting in a tweet, saying in part, we must do everything we can to end hate-fueled domestic terrorism. Shannon.
Alexis McAdams reporting from Buffalo. Alexis, thank you. Now the debate over abortion breaking wide open with the leak of a draft majority opinion that indicates the Supreme Court could soon overturn Roe v. Wade. Pro-choice proponents marching to the steps of the High Court this weekend. Democrats retooling their midterm message. And now the fight shifting to the halls of Congress and state houses across the country. In a moment, we'll be joined by 2 governors whose states are dealing with the issue very differently. Jared Polis of Colorado and Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma. But first, let's turn to Lucas Tomlinson at the White House with the latest from the Biden administration. Lucas?
And something finally pushed, well, actually last week they had the White House correspondent also, wasn't it? But anyway, I just kept it playing just to show that Lucas Tomlinson came second. They went to Buffalo first. But I think if you do a word count on the word black and the word racism, it's a lot lower in the Fox News reporting. Also, following up on my kind of joke before that it can't be a Fox News story if it doesn't have a factual error. There's one point in there where Shannon Bream said that the attack was, he streamed it all. Streamed it all on a camera on his helmet or whatever. But all the other reports I've seen have said that the Twitch stream was cut off after the first 2 minutes. So Fox News misreports that he streamed it all. Not that the first, it's good that even the first 2 minutes got streamed, but that is a factual error, I guess. And one other thing, there's this whole thing about how there was a security guard there with a gun who shot at him, but didn't kill him because he was wearing body armor. That was in all these reports, I think. And it kind of like, what happened to the whole, like, the answer to a good guy or a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun? Does that mean that the answer to a bad guy with a gun and body armor is a good guy with a gun and body armor? I mean, does that mean we have to have, like, good guys with guns and body, like teachers? We have to give teachers guns and body armor now? Like, I don't know. It seems like that Fox News talking point isn't going to work well for this particular mass shooting. And now I'm going to go to the CBS News Face the Nation news summary, which is just a little bit shorter. And like I said, I think it has the best map, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome. welcome to Face the Nation. I'm Margaret Brennan. We have a lot to get to today, but we begin with breaking news from Buffalo, New York, where an 18-year-old male is in police custody following a mass shooting that killed 10 and injured 3 others. That massacre is being investigated by the Justice Department as a hate crime and an act of, quote, racially motivated violent extremism. President Biden referred to it as an act perpetrated in the name of white nationalist ideology, and he has called for an end to hate-fueled domestic terrorism. CBS News correspondent Nancy Chen reports.
A shooter, a mass shooter. A frantic scene after a gunman opened fire at a Tops supermarket Saturday afternoon, starting in the parking lot. Police say the heavily armed suspect shot 4 people outside, killing 3 before moving inside the store.
When I first saw him shooting, he shot a woman, he shot a deacon, he shot another woman, and then he went in the store and started shooting again.
That's when police say he encountered a retired police officer working as a security guard who fired multiple shots that hit the gunman, but didn't impact him because of his tactical gear. The suspect then killed the guard. Officers say the suspect held a gun to his own neck after encountering police, but eventually surrendered.
This was pure evil. It was straight up racially motivated hate crime.
Of the 13 people shot, 11 were black. The suspect, 18-year-old Peyton Gendron, is believed to have posted a hate-filled manifesto shortly before the shooting, which he also live-streamed on the social media platform Twitch, authorities say. A law enforcement source told CBS News the suspect allegedly yelled racial slurs during the attack.
To see that sense of security shattered by an individual, a white supremacist who has engaged in an act of terrorism.
Gendron is from Conklin, New York, about 3.5 hours from Buffalo. He was arraigned hours after the attack on a first-degree murder charge, pleading not guilty.
A first-degree murder charge carries a sentence of life in prison without parole if convicted. The suspect is being held without bond and is set to appear in court again on Thursday. Margaret?
Nancy Chen, thank you. We want to go now to the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul. Good morning to you, Governor.
Oh, I guess I mispronounced it. It's Kathy Hochul. Did I say Hochul? Or, well, anyway, Kathy Hochul, governor of New York. I'll have a couple clips from her, but yeah, that was a good, that showed you like where he drove from. I was trying to figure out where in New York was 3.5 hour drive from Buffalo, and well, you saw it in the CBS News Face the Nation news summary there. The next one to juxtapose with it, and it has a little bit of, you know, that was the beginning of the program, focusing on this shooting that was like here this weekend and gone by next weekend. I saw some of the live viewers talking about that. Also, like David Forrester said, it'll just be added to the list. And so, yeah, didn't I see another? Anyway, the next news summary I'm going to show you, like I said, to juxtapose, is the ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. Briefly from George Stephanopoulos over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. We want to get right to the latest on that racist massacre in Buffalo. The attack Saturday afternoon in a neighborhood supermarket. The gunman, clad in body armor, methodically targeted victims with an assault rifle, taping it all with a camera on his helmet after posting a 180-page racist document online. By the time he surrendered, 13 shot, 10 dead. Almost all of the victims were black. In a statement late Saturday night, President Biden condemned the attack, calling it abhorrent to the very fabric of this nation. Stephanie Ramos starts us off from Buffalo. Good morning, Stephanie.
George, good morning. This is a community in shock. As you can see, police are still surrounding the grocery store and the parking lot where they say the suspect arrived here heavily armed, wearing tactical gear and military-type clothing, and opened fire. Shoppers in and around the grocery store detailing those chaotic moments, saying some were hiding behind cars, others were calling out for help as this gunman shot and killed 10 people and injured 3 others. Police believe this mass shooting was racially motivated. Now, George, I spoke with the mayor just a few moments ago, and he said that when he arrived here on the scene yesterday, he met the former fire commissioner. He thought he was responding to the scene, but then learned that he was looking for his 86-year-old mother, who stopped here to pick up a few items before visiting her husband down the street at a nursing home. These were people doing everyday things on a Saturday afternoon. Now, police have identified the suspect as 18-year-old Peyton Gendron. He has been arraigned on one count of first-degree murder. He's being held without bail. Police were at his home overnight searching for any type of evidence. And as you mentioned, police did find a 100-page document that he posted online before the shooting, where he wrote about racist and anti-Semitic ideas. Now, authorities are investigating this attack as a hate crime, all while this community reels from this shooting, George.
Thank you, Stephanie. We're joined now by the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul. Governor, thank you for joining us.
And I'm about to show you a couple of Kathy Hochul clips, but did Stephanie Ramos say 108 pages? Because I heard everyone else say the manifesto was 180 pages. And that was the first time I noticed in that clip, after criticizing Fox News for saying he streamed it all from his helmet cam. I think George Stephanopoulos in his intro there said that he taped it all from a camera in his helmet. So, and I doubt there was any videotape in there. And I don't know, did he also record it, or was it just streaming? That I don't know. But usually you don't stream and record at the same time, although I am currently streaming and recording at the same time. So I'm undermining my own argument there, but I don't know. That's the taped it all. I guess that's kind of an error there. But anyway, the last news summary is the shortest one, CNN State of the Union, and in some ways I guess it could be the winner of the news summary of the week. You've now about to have watched all 5 of them, so you can let me know which one you think was best. But here Dana Bash gives us the State of the Union, and she doesn't say replacement theory, but she gives the definition of replacement theory, which means she has the most vital information that Meet the Press does, but it's all condensed down into 80 seconds over here.
Good morning, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the state of our union is heartbroken and horrified. This morning, we are grieving the loss of 10 people in Buffalo, New York, shot and killed while shopping for groceries. 3 others were shot but survived, victims of a rampage by an 18-year-old white male shooter who authorities say traveled for hours and used an assault-style weapon to carry out the racist attack. 11 of the 13 victims were black. The shooter has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder in an attack streamed live on social media as the Justice Department examines whether he committed a hate crime and an act of racially motivated violent extremism. President Biden suggested the shooting was domestic terrorism. Investigators are reviewing a 180-page manifesto posted online in connection with the shooting probe, 2 law enforcement officials tell CNN. And the manifesto's author describes his perceptions about the dwindling size of the white population in the U.S. and claims of ethnic and cultural replacement of whites. He describes himself as a fascist, a white supremacist, and an anti-Semite who picked up most of his beliefs on the internet. Here with me now is New York Governor Kathy Hochul.
And I'm now about to show you 2 clips of Governor Kathy Hochul, although neither of them is from CNN State of the Union. But I thought that, like I said, that was a good news summary from CNN for as brief as it was. This next news clip is the Governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, being asked a question by Chuck Todd that I was criticizing earlier in the program as being based on a misleading premise about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And I actually think that Section 230 is really important. It's in some ways what makes like bulletin boards and YouTube and Facebook and all sorts of platforms, internet service providers and social platforms, that it gives them the ability to host content without being liable for what people then post. And I mean, that's pretty much exactly what it says. If you are like passively letting other people post stuff, like I'm posting a YouTube video, if I commit defamation, YouTube isn't responsible for what I said. And that only makes sense. It would be impossible for like, you know, every time you posted something on Facebook for the Facebook Corporation to like check it to make sure there's nothing in there that is defamatory or fraudulent or anyway, I mean, and other things too. But and then some people think it means that you have to be a neutral platform and not a publisher or whatever, and that is just not true. It doesn't say that. It actually gives various reasons you can also take off content, and so. But I don't want to go into a whole Section 230 analysis, even though I do happen to be a lawyer and all. But I just wanted to pre-criticize the clip here, and pre-criticize the clip. I don't know what's going on there, and I'll show it to you and figure out what's going on in the other room in a minute. Over here.
Well, let's talk about holding these internet companies responsible. Obviously, there's this law in the books that that allows the internet to sort of escape liability on so many things that, frankly, we as television broadcasters cannot escape the same liability. You think they should be held responsible for the for the easy spread of this propaganda?
I hold them responsible for not monitoring and alerting law enforcement. That's exactly because of the issue here is that it is fomenting. People are sharing these ideas. They're sharing videos of other attacks, and they're all copycat. They all want to be the next great white hope that can inspire the next attack. We can't let that continue, and we know where it's occurring. It's not happening in the basement of a KKK meeting anymore, where you have a limited number of people who are succumbing to these evil influences. This is happening globally. They're looking at what happened in New Zealand and what happened in Pittsburgh and what happened in South. They read this, they absorb this. This becomes part of their mentality, and they share it with others through the internet. That's the responsibility of the internet, and the individuals who are responsible are the ones who own these companies, and I'm going to be talking to them directly.
We also have TV commentators and some political figures that sort of appease this right-wing extremism, sort of have, you know, challenge anybody that pushes back. Maybe they come after it on speech grounds, freedom of speech or things like this. But it certainly seems as if there is a growing virus on the right, on the far right here, that is spreading dangerously.
And they need to be held accountable as well. And any government leader that does not condemn this and condemn it today is a coward, and they're also partially responsible. So let's just be real honest about the role of elected leaders, and what they need to be doing is calling this out and not coddling this behavior and saying that it's, well, that's just young people and they're sharing their ideas. Yeah, I'll protect the First Amendment any day of the week. But you don't protect hate speech. You don't protect incendiary speech. You're not allowed to scream fire in a crowded theater. There are limitations on speech, and right now we have seen this run rampant. And as a result, I have 10 dead neighbors in this community, and it hurts, and we're going to do something about it.
It really does hurt. Governor Kathy Hochul, really appreciate you spending a few minutes with us.
And there, I just let it play. As you can see, that was the end of the interview. But Chuck Todd, king of the non-follow-up, did not do a follow-up question about First Amendment doesn't protect hate speech. Actually, First Amendment does protect hate speech. Sorry to tell you that, but it's not. I mean, from the government suppressing it, yes. It doesn't necessarily prevent like Facebook or Twitch or private companies from suppressing hate speech, but that's because the First Amendment doesn't apply to private companies. But Governor Hochul was incorrect about that, and that's a little disturbing for the governor of New York not to know that. And Chuck Todd also, as a broadcaster, he was talking about how, you know, as a TV broadcaster, we don't get the protections of the, you know, that these internet companies do, but I don't know, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act protects internet service providers. My internet service provider is Xfinity Comcast, who happens to be the owner of Chuck Todd's program there, so I'm not sure what he's talking about. And it's not like Chuck Todd's boss, Xfinity Comcast, doesn't benefit from Section 230 protections also. Anyway, this next question is from Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation to Governor Hochul, and she actually asked a good question. You know, you're in New York, and there are not just social media companies, but there are media companies with big offices like the New York office of Fox News, like Fox News headquarters is in New York, and Tucker Carlson is one of the biggest mainstreamers of this whole replacement theory. I mean, that's my criticism of Margaret Brennan, is she should have made that more explicit, and then she lets Governor Hochul get away with like talking about social media companies and not media companies like Fox News and Tucker Carlson in her answer, even as I think she said on all the programs where she appeared, you know, you got to call people out, but she never like called anybody out. And she doesn't here, as I'll talk about a little more after we watch that clip together from yesterday.
I know you just mentioned going online and taking what's out there in the social media space seriously. You've called it a feeding frenzy for white supremacy. How do you actually regulate this without impeding on free speech? You have a number of media and social media companies with big offices in your state. Specifically, what are you asking them to do?
No, we want them to stay in our state. We also want them to be more vigilant and use the resources they have to hire more people, change their algorithms, be able to identify the second that this hate speech appears, and let there be a determination by law enforcement quickly. Law enforcement also monitors this as well. I mean, we have the FBI monitoring. We also have state police. So we need a multifaceted approach, but need vigilance, not just law enforcement, but also from the platforms that are allowing this to spread. They have a responsibility as well.
And so there was no follow-up from Margaret Brennan there. I didn't keep it playing, but actually, as usual, if you want to see the entire CBS News Face the Nation program, go to the link under sources in the video description. And by the way, that Fox News Star Trek article is down under sources in the video description. But if you go to the CBS News Face the Nation link, it goes to their YouTube channel where the whole program is split into segments, and you can watch the whole program video by video, including that entire interview and including this next segment, which is about 3 minutes long. I took this really just to juxtapose it with the 6-minute story on basically on the same topic from Fox News. Well, it's on the Pennsylvania primary, although Face the Nation only really recovers the Republican side. Fox News purports to cover the whole thing, and it's like they're covering different worlds. There's like the real problem is the Republican side. The three candidates are, you know, like moderately crazy, and really crazy, or whatever. You know, there's McCormick, who is like the most establishment, and then there's Dr. Oz, who's gotten the endorsement of Donald Trump. And he's had some out there ideas over the years, and is kind of a snake oil salesman on his own. And then there's this Kathy Barnette, who is like way out there. And that is made clear in the CBS News Face the Nation news summary, not made clear at all on Fox News. They actually spend more time attacking the Democratic frontrunner who had a stroke on Friday, although that wasn't known when this news summary played yesterday. But anyway, first I'm going to show you the real world one and then the alternative universe one from Fox News. But here's CBS News Face the Nation talking about the Republican Pennsylvania primary. And this is kind of on my topic of democracy on the brink that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Well, voters in 5 states head to the polls for midterm primary elections this Tuesday, and those contests will determine which party candidates will be on the ballot in November. But it is the contest among Republicans in Pennsylvania that is attracting a lot of attention. Our Robert Costa tells us why.
Top Republicans are flocking to Pennsylvania in the final days of the state's red-hot Senate primary race, knowing the state will be a crucial battleground in this November's midterm elections.
Every Republican running for office says, I love Donald Trump. No, I love Donald Trump even more. No, I have Donald Trump tattooed on my rear end.
And the top 3 contenders are all pitching themselves as champions of Trump's political legacy. But voters face a conundrum. Who exactly fits the bill? Television personality Dr. Mehmet Oz won Trump's endorsement last month. But Oz has since struggled to fend off 2 challengers, retired hedge fund manager David McCormick, whose wife Dina Powell served in the Trump administration as a deputy national security advisor, and hard-right candidate Kathy Barnette, whose fiery and deeply personal message on abortion has caught fire with grassroots conservatives.
But it definitely made me become very adamant about the sanctity of life.
But once polls in recent days showed Barnette jumping into the top tier, she also faced new and intense scrutiny of her past, including homophobic and anti-Muslim statements. Barnette has mostly denied and deflected, hoping to keep up her momentum. And on Saturday, at what was billed as her final campaign rally, Barnette spoke to supporters in Bucks County alongside Doug Mastriano, who was endorsed hours earlier by Trump in the race for governor.
Stand behind the cone, please.
But CBS News and others were refused entry. No access, no questions allowed.
They told us no press or allowed.
Trump has been watching her rise carefully and warned his supporters to stick with Oz, arguing Barnette, if nominated, will, quote, never be able to win in November. And her rivals are sounding the alarm. You've called Kathy Barnette a mystery person. What do you mean by that?
I call Kathy Barnette a mystery because every time she answers a question, she raises a bunch more questions. She's not transparent about so many aspects of her basic biography that we don't know who she is.
Would Kathy Barnette be a risky bet for Republicans in November?
Well, listen, I've gotten to know Kathy on the campaign trail. I respect her story. But Kathy's been tested. She was tested in the last 24 months in a congressional seat, which she lost by 20 points.
But the race remains a toss-up, with voters divided. For Face the Nation, this is Robert Costa reporting from Philadelphia.
So yeah, that was the CBS story, and it gave you a lot. Like I said, the David McCormick, Dr. Mehmet Oz, and then Kathy Barnette as the crazier craziest, or I mean, because they all even you saw the the really ironic Ted Cruz joke about how they're all trying to be Trumpier, like I love Trump, I love him more, I have Trump tattooed on my butt. Like he, of all people, Ted Cruz, who got so upset when Trump basically called his wife ugly and called him all these names, and then ended up endorsing him and has become, been from the Republican masculinity test index that Trumpism has. He's been totally emasculated by Trump, you would think, but Ted Cruz still wants to run for president again. So, but I don't know what to make of that weird clip. And anyway, you saw some of those tweets from Kathy Barnette that were really troubling. I even took a screenshot of it here. You could look at two about Islam and one about being seated next to a homosexual female. You see that 1 and 3 are actual full sentences, which is important when you hear in the clip after next, you'll see the biggest softball interview of Kathy Barnette from Shannon Bream on Fox News Sunday, where she claims a lot of the controversial tweets weren't even complete sentences. I don't know why that makes this second one better, but actually you will never see these 3 tweets in either the Fox News Sunday news summary about the Pennsylvania election I'm about to show you, or in the softball interview from Shannon Bream. She does show one tweet about Islam. It has to do with with Obama being a Muslim, but none of these, for some reason, ever make it in there. And I thought that was good coverage of the Republican side of the primary from Face the Nation, but the coverage here from Fox News Sunday you're about to see from there. I had to cut off the intro from Shannon Bream because this is already 6 minutes long, so it's already twice as long as the last one. But it's supposed to be covering both the Democrats and the Republicans, and if you watch this, you think the greatest conflict in the entire primary is between Connor Lamb and John Fetterman, the Democrats, as to whether Fetterman is a socialist or not. Even though it wasn't even Connor Lamb who said it, it was some independent expenditure that said it. And as I said, since then, John Fetterman has apparently had a stroke that he's recovering from, but he's still probably the front runner. And you'll see him appear in this news summary, but very little talk about the negatives of the Republican candidates. And I will talk about that news summary, that very biased, news in quotation marks, because we know Fox News is not really a news organization. If you read The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman, you know that Roger Ailes created Fox News to be the propaganda outlet of the Republican Party, and they are obviously fulfilling that function in this next news summary, and then in the softball interview of Kathy Barnette I'll show after that. But here's the news summary I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
This town was so prosperous. There were stores and restaurants. This was like Times Square.
Braddock, Pennsylvania sits just east of Pittsburgh in what was once known as the Steel Valley.
But once the mills went, I think a lot of sense of pride of the families went too.
The Edgar Thompson Steel Mill is a rare survivor of the industry's 1980s collapse. While still operational, its days as the town's lifeblood have long gone. Directly across the street is what used to be a prominent car dealership.
You had some experience with that, right?
Yeah, my dad bought a car there in mid-50s.
It's now the home of Democratic Senate candidate John Fetterman.
We need to keep making shit in this country.
Fetterman is, shall we say, an outsized political figure in Pennsylvania, a winner perhaps in part because he didn't look the part.
So much. She's yes. Most important thing.
He spent 13 years as Braddock's mayor and then became lieutenant governor.
Pats or Genos, those are more tourists.
Fetterman has so far held a comfortable lead in the primary race, even as his opponent, Connor Lamb, has called him too progressive. A PAC backing Lamb ran a short-lived ad calling Fetterman a Democratic socialist.
Socialist Fetterman.
Does that hurt the party as a whole, him using words like that?
It's Connor's story. He can tell it the way he needs to. You know, neither he nor I are socialists, obviously. But I guess, when, you have, trouble in polls and money, you say things that are desperate.
The voter demographic in Pennsylvania is nearly identical to the United States as a whole, with the looks and leanings of each region differing greatly. So as the candidates put in the miles,
we're headed west.
So did we.
These campaigns, a lot of them have been traveling for like 100 days now. So you want to just go to the VFWs, get to the diners, and then hope that the local officials along the way will endorse you.
Who's introducing?
We caught up with Republican Senate candidate David McCormick at a campaign stop outside of Philadelphia.
It's going to be close, so thank you for being here.
A former hedge fund CEO, McCormick is facing a very tight primary race.
Stakes are high.
For the majority of this campaign, McCormick has been polling neck and neck with a pretty distinct character, celebrity heart surgeon Dr. Mehmet Oz.
When you're making the case to those who are still avid supporters of former President Trump, how are you balancing winning them over still without the endorsement?
He's very popular, and Mehmet Oz isn't very popular. And the reason he's not popular is because his positions don't line up with primary voters.
Road tripping to the other side of the state, we would discuss this with Dr. Oz. But first, we paid a visit to someone within a group of increasingly coveted voters. Beth Ann Roska is a suburban mom.
So I had been a liberal Democrat for 34 years.
But that changed during the pandemic as she felt COVID school closures and mask mandates dealt too heavy a burden on families. Because of that, she says parents' eyes were open to policy and curriculum issues.
If they had just opened the schools, all of us parents would have just gone back to our jobs and our lives, and we would have stopped paying attention.
She says crime and inflation have also become issues weighing heavily on families.
I went to the grocery store. I had 3 little bags of groceries, and it was over $100.
The latest Monmouth University poll puts inflation at the top of Republican voters' concerns, followed by illegal immigration, which many see as contributing to drug smuggling and worsening a glaring opioid epidemic. A less than 2-hour drive west, and the contrasts within the Commonwealth become more vivid. Lancaster County is home to the country's largest Amish population. They shy away from showing their faces on camera, but in recent years have broken tradition by showing up to the polls, almost always in favor of Republican candidates. And further west, where there are a lot more cars to fill up,
we're just working class people, blue collar people.
Rising costs overall begin at the fuel pump.
You have to get diesel, which is expensive itself. You have to make sure that you can afford your food over the road.
Do you think people are going to take what's happened to their wallet and then go to the polls and try to...
I hope they do.
Among Democrats, the issue of abortion also suddenly reemerged as a rallying cry.
You can't just sit back and relax and assume that things will continue on the same way that they have.
I think it should be a very concerning moment for all Americans, and I'm hoping it'll bring people out to the polls.
Pennsylvania, we're going to have a lot of fun.
On the Republican side, a different rallying cry.
Dr. Oz.
Former President Donald Trump throwing his weight behind Dr. Oz.
Thank you for the endorsement.
I'd probably be voting for Dr. Oz, even though I heard that he is a liberal as far as abortion is concerned.
Dr. Mehmet Oz.
Back in Western Pennsylvania, Oz greeted fans and undecided voters, assuring them that he believes life begins at conception.
There are all kinds of people who are confused because after $30 million of negative ads have run against you, you can confuse people.
Prior to our sit-down interview, I mentioned that I had felt lightheaded earlier in the week. And in true form,
let me feel a pulse.
Despite a career in medicine and TV, Oz says the former president's backing proves he's the right choice.
Said, I am smart, tough, and will never let you down. He wrote that to address the folks who are saying what you're saying, which is, Oz is, Trump endorsed, but is he really the right person? Yeah, he is.
But in recent weeks, another serious but far less well-funded Republican contender has emerged. Former congressional primary candidate Kathy Barnette.
People didn't expect this. These other candidates were too busy infighting, and that you've now seen this surge.
It hasn't been vicious. I've been focused, right? And they're mad now that I've ran a far superior campaign. Little old me. They didn't expect it.
Off the campaign trail, in Pennsylvania's eclectic Commonwealth of communities, life still churns. And politicians have made promises before.
They're still manufacturing. It's never going to go back to the 50s and 60s. If it did, that would be one of the greatest miracles of my lifetime.
Alex Hoff reporting from Pennsylvania. Joining us now, Kathy Barnette, one of...
Ooh, so yeah, that I pretty much pre-criticized that clip in terms of how it was skewed in terms of trying to increase the conflict between the Democratic candidates and downplay the conflict between the Republicans. One thing also I forgot to mention, you notice how it starts off and how rundown Braddock, Pennsylvania is, and how it's seen better days and all these bad things in Braddock. And and by the way, the leading Democratic candidate, John Fetterman, mayor of Braddock for 13 years, not related in any way to our attack piece on Braddock at the beginning, just coincidental that we decided to start the story there and make it look really bad. And then of course they found that one woman who's liberal Democrat for 34 years, but changed because of the COVID epidemic, and her big issues are crime and inflation. I mean, I've talked before about not just Fox News, but how all the media people who pick out 1, 2, 3, 4, however many people to represent the voters of Pennsylvania, that is always a fool's errand and results in a very biased presentation. I mean, sometimes, I guess if you're, buyer beware or viewer beware, you know what you're getting, then you get to see a few people. But I always wonder, how did Fox News find that woman who was a liberal Democrat for 34 years, but now believes everything Fox News believes? That I found a little odd. In crime, inflation. And then they showed the biggest concerns of voters, but they were Republican voters. They mentioned Republican voters, but that was supposed to be a story about all the voters, and somehow it really focused on the concerns of Republican voters, it looked like to me. There was that brief mention of abortion there, and the entire, even the Monmouth poll they were relying on was taken before the leaked draft of the Supreme Court opinion overruling Roe v. Wade, which may have changed some of those calculations, although probably not for Republican voters anyway. But I think I've kind of pre-criticized and post-criticized that clip now. And as I said, you never saw any of these tweets from Kathy Barnette anywhere in that news summary. They were totally downplayed the craziness of any of the candidates. I mean, the worst thing that they talked about really was the accusation against Dr. Oz that he was pro-abortion, and then they gave him time to refute that, and saying it was only because of the $30,000 or was it $300,000 worth of ads spent against him or whatever, and they never even said who spent the money. But finally, I have been promising this softball interview of Kathy Barnette. This is just the end part where she doesn't even really ask about the worst of the social media posts. She doesn't ask about any of these tweets. One that's like more innocuous probably than any of these tweets, and asks, can you give us the context of it? And then just Shannon Bream, the Fox News host, just shuts up and lets her talk and talk and talk, totally like obfuscating the issue, not answering the issue, changing the topic, doing whataboutism and all of that. And then the follow-up to it all is just, well, you know, the Democrat isn't going to be soft on, isn't going to pull punches on this, which, like, it's almost like Shannon Bream's admitting that in her interview she is pulling punches, because basically unless you are saying that the one tweet that they show here, where I think she says Obama's Muslim or whatever, that's a punch. Other than that, all punches pulled by Shannon Bream, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that interview of Kathy Barnette from Shannon Bream together over here.
Mm-hmm. It's a great state. As I told you during the commercial, I married into a Pennsylvania family, and it's a great place to have family. So let me ask you about social media posts, because you've said some of these are taken out of context. I want to give you a chance to respond to them then. A tweet in 2014, you said, if you love freedom, Islam must not be allowed to thrive under any condition. You've got tweets about former President Obama. One of them in 2016 says, Obama is a Muslim doing Muslim-like things. He has said that he is not. He is a practicing Christian. So any context then for those particular tweets?
Yeah, let me just say, in almost all of those tweets, especially when you look at the time frame we were living in, at that particular time, we had the Obama administration bringing in a lot of Syrian refugees. At that time, I was watching the former FBI director, James Comey, testify, I believe, in front of the Senate, saying we can vet until the cows come home and we won't know who these people are. And yet Obama at the time was telling the American people, don't worry about it. We're going to vet everyone. And what we were watching as Americans was very unnerving. And I'm sure the people will remember that. We were looking at the Pulse nightclub shooting. We were watching people take vehicles, weaponize them, and run people down in the street. We were looking at the San Bernardino shooting. We were looking at some very unnerving things that as Americans we thought would never happen here. And at that time, I was hosting a show called Truth Exchange, and I would have all kinds of ideas and was leaning into helping the public begin to have those conversations. And so those are that's the context around a lot of those tweets. The overwhelming majority of the tweets that are now being presented are not even full thoughts. They're not even full sentences. And yet people take it and they begin to build their own narrative around it. So I can't provide a lot of context because, again, it's almost 10 years ago. That's how far they have to go back to try to find anything on me. What I can say, although I can't provide a lot of context to that because it's a half thought and everything is not there for me to be able to speak to it. What I can say is that I love my country, and I have always loved my country, and I have always been willing not to blink in the face of difficult discussions. We're facing a lot of difficult discussions, and on those 1,500 miles traveling all around the Commonwealth, people feel squeezed, and no one is asking me about my tweets. What they're talking about are the illegal immigration. We're on track for 4 million unlawfully present people this year alone. They're talking about inflation. I had someone called me the other day saying they're driving over an hour because they heard a rumor about baby formula milk. We have some very real issues, and that is the reason why I'm surging and doing so well, is because throughout this entire time, I've kept the main thing, and that's Pennsylvanians.
Okay, you know that if you win this primary, your Democratic opponent, Mr. Fetterman, is going to bring up these things and more. So they haven't come to light until now because you have done so well and your opponents feel you are a threat. How will you answer him? Because he will not, pull punches on these many things.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, people ask me all the time, are you afraid to run against Fetterman? And my response is generally, as long as I'm not running while black. And many of your listeners will know that he is, not only accused, but he held a black man up with a shotgun. So Democrats have their own issues. And I truly believe that as we continue to move throughout this year, the American people, and specifically Pennsylvanians, are going to, again, begin to prioritize their kitchen table issues above a lot of the other noise that we're hearing right now. People are unnerved. People are just afraid. I think most people know something has gone fundamentally wrong with how our nation is being governed. And while my two primary opponents were spending $60 million attacking themselves and refusing to go to debates, we had 7 debates, and Mehmet Oz and Dave McCormick only showed up to 2. We had a number of forums, and I can only recall them showing up to 2. And then while they were attacking one another on television, I was out here with the people. We spent less than $2 million, and they're mad. They're mad because I didn't ask for permission to be in this space. I just walked in because this is my country, and our country is in trouble. And I don't believe we have any more room to elect warm bodies with an R next to their name and say, hey, check, Republicans win. We don't win. It's not working out for us.
Okay. And as to that incident you referred to with Mr. Fetterman, I confess, not familiar with that allegation. I will dig into that and make sure we get some information out.
It is there.
Okay.
It is there.
Ms. Barnette, thank you for your time. Today we will follow the returns, and we'll see what happens for you on Tuesday.
Thank you so much for having me.
Up next, the Biden.
So, wow, yeah, that was total softball. And then what is that about John I heard there was some incident where he pulled a shotgun on someone who he thought was... I don't know why he thought the person was a threat, but who turned out to be an unarmed black jogger. But I thought like the Republicans were for gun rights or whatever, and stand your ground and all that. That should probably like be a positive on Fox News, I thought. But anyway, I pretty much pre-criticized that clip. I think you saw, and the way Shannon Bream let her talk and not answer the question and didn't really follow up, except for, what about when your Democratic brings up the things that I didn't even bring up, and didn't even bring up any of these tweets, as I told you. So that was the Fox News treatment of the person who obviously has a past of saying some pretty unhinged things, who may actually win the Pennsylvania primary, and now is going to be going up against John Fetterman, probably, who just had this stroke. Who knows what? That's what our democracy hinges on. I don't know. But this next clip is kind of interesting because it's from CNN State of the Union. They had on Governor Pete Ricketts of Nebraska, who's a very conservative Republican, but I mentioned this earlier in the show, he kind of beat out the Trump endorsement. His endorsed candidate won, not Trump's candidate. And he's actually also fighting Trumpism by going to campaign for Brian Kemp over in Georgia for governor, because they're both governors, and he's like co-chair of the Republican Governors Association, Pete Ricketts. And, Brian Kemp was the governor who wouldn't help Trump subvert the 2020 election and kept saying the Georgia election was clean. And Trump has spent all this time attacking him and has endorsed David Perdue, his opponent, even though David Perdue is losing. And anyway, you'll see that... can you hear Dash off in the background there? I did get a clip of Dash during that Fox News report over there, and I'll show that to you later. That'll be my Dash clip, but I guess maybe it's getting close to dinner time for Dash. But anyway, here, this is like the good part of the Republican Party, and I don't agree with this guy on anything, but he's the guy who's like fighting Trumpism, and here's how he explains it. And there's this weird, there's kind of this comical section here where Dana Bash says, "Is it true that Trump refused your request not to come into the Nebraska primary?" And watch for the comical answer to that over in this clip.
All right, Governor, let's talk about the Republican Party. The candidate you endorsed to replace you just defeated the candidate that former President Trump endorsed in your state's Republican primary. Does this show that there are limits to the power of the Trump endorsement?
Well, here in Nebraska, the candidate that President Trump endorsed was a deeply flawed candidate, had a number of different scandals around him. It's one of the reasons why I picked one of his opponents. In a contested primary, we ought to expect that the Republicans are going to be different sides of this. It's not unusual. I support many of President Trump's policies, but in this case, we are on opposite sides of it. And at the end of the day, I think voters in individual states, and it's certainly true here in Nebraska, they make their own decisions. People outside the state can have an influence, but at the end of the day, Nebraskans look to their own, and Nebraskans made the decision they wanted for their state.
This isn't just about Nebraska. You're going to travel to Georgia this week, just like Chris Christie and Mike Pence are, to campaign for Governor Brian Kemp. He's running again against a Trump-endorsed challenger, that being David Perdue. I think it's fair to say there are a few Republicans who Donald Trump dislikes more than Brian Kemp after that governor refused to overturn the 2020 election. Would it be easier, your job as a co-chair of the Republican Governors Association, if President Trump just stayed out of these primaries?
Well, I try to focus on the things I can control, and what President Trump does is not one of those things. As co-chair of the Republican Governors Association, we've been very clear that we support our incumbents. Brian Kemp is a great incumbent. He's done a fantastic job in Georgia. We're excited to support him, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going to Georgia, because I think Brian Kemp deserves another term, and I think he's going to be able to beat Tracy Abrams. So This is a man who's done a great job, and he deserves to be reelected.
You can't control him. So is it true that you asked the president, the former president, to stay out of the primary in your home state of Nebraska, and he refused?
Yeah, he at the time he didn't refuse. He said he'd get back to me later. But yes, I did call him last summer and asked him to stay out of the primary race. But I guess that's a great example of things you can control and things you can't control.
And the former president just announced he's endorsing Doug Mastriano in the Pennsylvania governor's race. He was a key player in trying to overturn the 2020 election in Pennsylvania, in that legislature. Party leaders there worry he can't win the general election. As the co-chair of the RGA, would you support him if he's the nominee?
So we support the people that the Republican nominees that the people of those states elect. We make those decisions based on where we think we can be effective. Our policy has long been we get involved in races where we think we can win. So that candidate, whoever gets elected in Pennsylvania, will have to show that they're going to make it a good race. And if it's a good race, the Republican Governors Association will be there to support our Republican nominee.
That's not a ringing endorsement.
Well, again, I'm not familiar specifically with all the candidates in Pennsylvania. Where we have an open seat like that, the Republican Governors Association doesn't get involved. So we wait till the people of that state pick their nominee. And then, of course, we decide on which races we can be effective in. And that's where we allocate our resources.
How do you see former President Trump right now? Is he the leader of the GOP?
I would think one of the things I think there's a lot of misconception about just generally is that there's some, big monolithic thing called the Republican Party. It's very decentralized. Certainly President Trump, has a very big influence on the Republican Party. Again, I get back to supporting his policies. They were fantastic when he was in office. You could see the results in the economy, the reduction in income inequality, reduction in, African American unemployment, Asian American unemployment, just how many people were working in our workforce. So great policies that helped out our country. And I think that continues to have an influence in Republicans because the policies that he was putting in place were ones broadly Republican support. So I think that without a Republican president, there's a lot of different leaders. President Trump certainly has a lot of influence because his policies were so good.
Before I let you go, one final question about Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court.
And one of the things you would hear if I let that keep playing is, even though he seems like the more rational Republican, like the anti-Trumpism Republican, his next answer there about Roe v. Wade being overturned is he believes life begins at conception, and he wants to protect all the preborn babies in Nebraska. like 5,000 preborn babies were killed last year, and we're not going to let that happen. No exceptions, rape, incest, nothing. So that's like the good side of the Republican Party. The governor of Nebraska, who's kind of fighting the Trumpism, although you heard him, he was like almost trying to deny he was supporting Brian Kemp because he's an incumbent, not because he accepts the reality of the 2020 election. And I don't know. You can let me know. Is he sufficiently fighter of Trumpism to not be evil, or you can let me know you think in the comments section. And I have two more quick news clips. This next one is actually about the Republican Party. This is about Elise Stefanik. And I don't know if you watch MSNBC's Morning Joe, but they've been like, I think it was this morning. Yeah, this morning they were like really going off on her. Joe Scarborough was saying, we met her and she seemed so nice and rational. And she started off as an anti-Trumper, Representative Elise Stefanik. But then she changed, and because she wants to be Speaker of the House. Apparently, there's some people who think that Kevin McCarthy will never be Speaker of the House. Trump will never let him be Speaker of the House, and I've talked about that before. And on Morning Joe this morning, they were saying Elise Stefanik might want to be Speaker of the House, and she's definitely a Republican leader. And she put out a tweet a few days ago, and that's the subject of this next clip, where Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi is asked on... oh, wait, was there something I forgot? Oh, I forgot one other thing I forgot to mention about the last clip. Governor Pete Ricketts, he referred to Stacey Abrams as Tracy Abrams, but maybe that clears up the mystery. Maybe Tracy Abrams played the president of the Federation. It was Stacey Abrams who played the president of Earth on Star Trek Discovery. No, it was just, well, anyone can say, make a mistake, Tracy instead of Stacey. That's nothing. So it's not like Trump saying that he was the other. What was he saying? He wanted to. He was. Who was it? He said he was endorsing. Never. I can't even remember. But this next clip is the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, asked about this tweet from Representative Elise Stefanik, and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, I think, totally misses on this softball question from, this is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Did I say it was from CNN? Because Nancy Pelosi was on multiple shows, but this is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And she totally misses on this softball question because what is the implication of this tweet from Elise Stefanik? Why have I had this whole wind-up about her being a Republican leader who's moved towards Trumpism? Well, because if you pay attention here, if you pay attention, please, to what Elise Stefanik is saying in this tweet, she's saying we should starve, that's right, the U.S. government should starve immigrant babies, because there is a formula shortage that is affecting American babies. That is the implication of this tweet, and why Nancy Pelosi does not pick up on it. And like, it's if you get a softball question like that, you're supposed to. Sorry, I used to hit lefty when I would play baseball, so that's how I would hit it out of the park. So, anyway, LiberalViewer's a lefty. Who would have thought it? I'll talk about that a little more after we watch Nancy Pelosi answer that softball question without really pointing out the evil implication of it in this clip.
So many families are also facing this baby formula shortage right now, dire shortage across the country. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Republican from here in New York, is laying this on President Biden and his shipping of pallets of baby formula to the southern border. She has a tweet right there where she says, as American families face empty shelves, this is unacceptable. Is that why we're facing this shortage?
As usual, her statement is totally irresponsible. Babies are crying. We need to get them food, and the president has it. Now, what we're doing this week in the Congress is, again, Bobby Scott, chair of the Education Labor Committee, that's the jurisdiction, that will lower some of the regulations, et cetera, so that it's easier to buy it. 50% of the WIC 50% of the
Women,
baby
Infants, and
formula
Children's
is from
program.
WIC, and so loosening that. But in addition to that, Rosa DeLauro, who's been on this case for a while, she was the chair of the Agriculture Subcommittee of Appropriations now she's chair of the whole committee. But she has been working on this to have some funding so that we can immediately purchase overseas. There are 4 countries, Chile, Mexico, Ireland, and the Netherlands, that have supply that might be available to us. The president is quite correct. We must do something as quickly as possible, but as safely as possible, and use caution for these babies. But we have to move quickly to do that. And part of this is, again, the supply chain issue.
So, yeah, I kind of pre-criticized that clip, and like I said, that was a pretty evil tweet from Emilie Stefanik, and Nancy Pelosi did call it irresponsible and said babies are crying, but you didn't say, how can you suggest that we starve immigrant babies that are under the care of the U.S. government at the border? That, I mean, if you're in U.S. custody and you're a baby, where are you supposed to get your food? That's my question. I actually saw there apparently are like about 400 at any one time. There are like 400 immigrant babies in the custody, and there are millions of, I think was it Jen Psaki I saw like debunk this whole thing? Maybe it was Jen Psaki at a press conference, but that there are like 400 babies that 400 immigrant babies that we're feeding with formula, and there are millions of American babies that need formula, and starving those 400 babies aren't really going to do much to help those millions of American babies. And anyway, the whole thing was ridiculous, and Nancy Pelosi could have done a better job. And I want to get to this final clip, and I put it at the end because the fact that it's at the end kind of shows the dangerousness of the answer you're going to get. This is on the subject of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and you may have noticed this week, and they were both, the war in Ukraine was covered on the Sunday shows, and I'm about to show you one clip, but it was not the main topic. It was like pushed off to the second half, or there was like maybe one interview in most of the shows having to do with the war in Ukraine. I mean, it was covered, but not at the beginning this week. It wasn't at the beginning last week because of the leaked opinion in Roe v. Wade, and that's just the way the attention of the American people and the American media and the whole Western media, how many weeks in a row can they make the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the top story? I've been doing my Monday media mix-up on it for many weeks, and sometimes it's hard to cover the same story and over again. It gets kind of repetitive, especially when it's like a long stalemate. And the thing is that that may be what Vladimir Putin is depending on. And the fact that this is like the one clip all the way at the end means maybe he's not wrong to try to depend on the West losing focus, not wanting to keep up the sanctions, not wanting to keep up the support. Is there going to be a consistent level of support, or is attention going to wane? Well, that's one of the questions that is asked and answered in this final clip. George Stephanopoulos talking to the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, Olga Stefanishyna, I think is how you pronounce that. Probably not how you pronounce that. But anyway, I'll talk about it a little more after we watch that final clip together over here. Oh, and the other thing, there's like this glitchy beginning here, and this is actually how it was broadcast on ABC, and I only include the glitch at the beginning because it makes me feel better about how many. I actually have a lot fewer. I just said fewer glitches. A lot fewer glitches than I used to in terms of playing the wrong video and stuff. It happens every now and then, but it makes me feel a little better that even the multi-million-dollar or even the huge corporate news media outlets also have their glitches, as you can see in the glitch from the broadcast on ABC, introducing the topic I already talked about over here.
There you see Senator Mitch McConnell, other Republican leaders meeting with President Zelensky in Ukraine yesterday, and we're joined now by the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Olga Stefanishina. Deputy Prime Minister, thank you for joining us this morning. We saw the Ukraine Defense Minister warn on Friday that we're entering a new long phase of this war. What's your sense of what's happening on the battlefield right now?
Well, what we see is a certain, a cautious amount of great news. We see that the Russian troops has been moving away from the major parts of the western Ukraine in Kharkiv and Zaporizhia regions, which are just near the Donetsk and Lugansk regions. But we are not over optimistic in that regard. We see that Putin has readjusted his strategy, and he goes on the only possible winning scenario for him is the long-lasting war, which is not the case for us and for the democratic world. So we're gaining back significant amount of our territories around Ukraine, but the unconditional victory still remains as the way forward. Although we can confirm that the Russian Navy and warships are in full preparedness to continue shelling, and basically the bombarding of the western part of the eastern part of Ukraine, which are the major supply chains for the humanitarian and defensive assistance, has been attacked over these nights, and we see that the casualties happening throughout all of the territories of Ukraine is repeating.
What do you make of the moves by Finland and Sweden this week to join?
Oh, and the moves by Finland and Sweden, that's big news that did get kind of covered. And like I said, Ukraine wasn't completely absent from the coverage, but it wasn't the main, a mass shooting can take it off the headlines, and you know how many of those there are. And so that's actually a real serious question. You heard the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine say, that Russia can do the long-lasting war strategy, and Ukraine and the democratic countries maybe not so much. And it has to do with attention and commitment, and Russia, Putin, he's already had the war for 8 years, since 2014. 8 years when he first took over Crimea and part of the Donbass region, and so who says he couldn't hold on for another 8 years? And I don't know, it's certainly not going to be the top story for the next 8 years, and it's not even going to be the top story every week for the next month. I doubt. Well, I guess unless he uses a nuclear bomb, and that's the point. Is the long war that's not on the front pages is more to Putin's benefit, and that could very well be what happens. Who knows? It looks like Ukraine's winning on the battlefield, but they're also taking a lot of casualties and a lot of damage. So you can let me know what you think about that in the comment section. I was reading along the live comments. I saw somebody ask me a question about, Grumpy Cat asked what I thought of Rachel Hamm running for California Secretary of State. I actually am involved in both local and state politics somewhat, and I don't know who Rachel Hamm is. I think she's one of the Republican candidates. I just looked it up real quick, an author or whatever, but the Democratic candidate, Shirley Weber, who was appointed and running for election, not re-election, because she was appointed. Our previous Secretary of State, who I met when he was Secretary of State, is Alex Padilla, but now he's the senator from California appointed to replace Kamala Harris because she's vice president. Anyway, so Shirley Weber was a great ally on a lot of ACLU issues, sponsored some important bills. I'm pretty sure she sponsored AB 392, which was one of the police use of force bill that was passed after the shooting of Stephon Clark here in Sacramento. So I'm a big supporter of Shirley Weber. I don't know anything about Rachel Hamm or any of the Republicans who are running, but that's my answer to that question from Grumpy Cat. And with that, I guess I should finish up the program. I will be back next Monday. I don't have a lot of time to make videos, but I do want to make that Star Trek video. Even if it takes me more than a week, I'll talk about it again next week. But that false Fox News claim Star Trek has gone woke, I'd really like to find the time to put that together. Because even if it doesn't get a lot of views, I'll just enjoy making it. And whatever happens, happens. And the final thing, I guess, I said I took that bonus Dash clip. Here, let me give you the bonus Dash clip for the Dash fans out there. This is Dash, my cat. Not taking Sandy's place, unfortunately, very often. I was hoping he might come in here and lie down in the Sandy spot, but he kind of looked and left. Here's him looking and leaving, and you can hear one of the clips playing in the background because I had it playing. So to verify this actually happened during the show, to finish the show, over here.
You know, even though I heard that he is a liberal as far as abortion is concerned.
Back in Western.
So yeah, Dash thought about coming in, but then didn't. And you heard the Fox News summary about Mehmet Oz being a liberal on abortion in the background. Oh, look at that. Dash is back. Maybe he heard... Oh, now he's walking away. But anyway, that's the program. I appreciate all of you who joined me. If you want to support my program, you can give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, leave supportive comments, or if you want to support it financially, there are links underneath the video description to become a monthly patron on Patreon. I've actually gotten a few new patrons in the last month or so, so that's always makes me feel like maybe I should keep doing this beyond the November midterms, and if people like it enough to have more people joining Patreon than who are leaving. You know, there are always a few who are leaving, but I just had a few joining, so that makes me feel good. Or direct PayPal contributions. If you give either a $5 or $10 contribution, where's my... I have like a hashtag LiberalViewer sticker. Wait, am I pointing to it here? That looks like this one that I will send you, and I will also send you an ACLU Constitution with a Know Your Rights with the police section in the back. And anyway, that's my support Liberal Viewer e-begging for the week, and I'll be back next Monday, or if I have some other reason to upload a video. But until one of those things happens, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.